welcome to Sustainability in Your Ear, the Earth911.com podcast for the week of January 8th, 2019. Happy New Year! This is Evelyn Lopez. We are recording at the bright and shiny, although it's actually a little gray and rainy, Moonyard Recording Studio in Tacoma, Washington. It's a brand new year, and so we are starting out fresh with, ready for it? Veganuary. And we're talking about green eating. It's also a great time to start thinking about your travel plans for the year. So today, we do not have our publisher, Earth911 publisher Mitch Ratcliffe, with us. He's off in the swamps of Bellevue. But we do have Earth911 writers Sarah Lozanova and Trey Granger. Sarah, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's nice and snowy here in Belfast, Maine.
Oh, I don't think we're going to get any snow in Washington State on the west side this year. It's just too much rain.
Oh, no.
All rain.
Just come visit me in Maine.
I know. I think that would be kind of fun. Should do a road trip. And Trey Granger, Trey, where are you today?
I am in Arizona, where it actually did snow on New Year's Eve. Got some snow in Scottsdale.
Really? Not very
often that happens.
No, Scottsdale's a little higher, but even still, that's pretty rare. Yeah, I have a friend she's in Goodyear, and she was complaining. You know, she's gotten rid of all of her Washington clothes, and she only has sort of Arizona clothes, and she was cold.
It is a little bit of a cold spell right now. We're in the 40s.
Wow, that's a big change. Well, let's get started with our surveys. We do have one survey up on our website. The question was, and it goes with our theme, will you embrace sustainable eating in 2019? So our readers responded, and they said that 69% of the respondents said they plan to prioritize plants to reduce freshwater use and reduce deforestation. 12% said they plan to minimize meat to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, water use, and pollution. 4% thought that they would select new seafood to reduce overfishing. 4% said they were going to look local for the food they need to reduce transportation-related CO2 emissions. And 12% said they plan to eat mindfully to achieve overall waste and environmental damage reduction. So tell me, Sarah and Trey, do these changes, people planning to prioritize plants and reduce meats and maybe changing their seafood, does that kind of go with what you're hearing out and about meal planning in 2019?
Yeah, it seems like there's more and more awareness about the water footprint of food. And I think that was reflected in the survey results. I think it's interesting that almost 70% are prioritizing plants to reduce freshwater use. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I think has been getting a lot more attention lately.
I think so.
I'm hoping the reason that the answer about looking local is so low is that people are already doing that. Because that's definitely a really important thing. If people are shopping at farmers markets, that's a great way to green eat in 2019.
Yeah. I kind of wonder about that 4% too, because in some ways that's one of the more easy things to do depending on where you live.
Yeah, as is the last one on reducing waste. Mm-hmm. So much food is wasted. So just, keeping a closer tab on what is in the fridge can save a lot of water and carbon emissions as well.
Yeah. And I think talking about it and, of course, for many people, there are positive health benefits as well to changing up to a more plant-based diet. So I think talking about it is one way to get people thinking about what they want to do. And the New Year's a perfect time to do that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We also have a new interview up on the website. It is with the Oceanic Society, and this is kind of interesting. Mitch talked with Wayne Sentman, who's the Director of Conservation Travel Programs at the Oceanic Society. And what they are doing is they are celebrating Pantone's Color of the Year. And this year, Pantone has selected Living Coral, which is apparently a very vibrant red-orange, sort of like the red coral you'll see in jewelry. That's the color of the year. And so they're expecting that a lot of positive messaging will be out and about on the importance of coral, awareness of coral bleaching and climate change. And they also hope that they can use this as a step off to encourage people to adopt blue habits. And a blue habit which I guess is sort of similar to a green habit, but in the water, will help people reduce pollution and also reduce overfishing, as well as keep coral reefs alive in the face of climate change. So that should be a really interesting listen. If folks haven't listened to that, I would strongly advise it. We'll have more interviews coming up over the next few weeks. And also, by the way, if you have an idea for an interview, drop us a line because we're always open to those suggestions. But, in terms of green eating, what else would be a blue habit? Do you have any suggestions, Sarah?
Well, there's a lot of information about seafood and selecting seafood that's lower on the food chain and is more sustainably harvested. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a great place to start. The Monterey Aquarium puts out information on that can be quite helpful.
Oh, that's
and they even have a little
idea.
pocket guide that you can put in your wallet to have at restaurants. Although I have found it a little bit hard to follow some of those because oftentimes it's hard to determine where the seafood came from. There's a lot less traceability with seafood than there are with some other types of food.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and Trey, I know that you stopped eating warm-blooded mammals a few years ago. Do you eat a lot of fish in your diet?
I do a lot of fish and fowl, and it definitely makes me feel better. Mm-hmm. But it's something that you'll definitely notice at first. I feel like if you give it up those first few weeks, you'll notice the lack of meat in your life.
Mm-hmm. And are there any types of fish that you think are sort of a better option in terms of the overfishing and the fish populations?
See, I'm more cautious about the health side of things. Fish like tuna, where they have mercury contamination oftentimes because of the way they are sourced. Those are the kind of things that I try to limit my input to only a couple times per week. For health reasons.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I like to eat fish, and living in the Northwest, it's really pretty easy. And I try to get fish that's either fairly local or coming from Alaska. But I am going to take a look at that Monterey Aquarium information because I don't really know which fish stocks are overfished. I don't really have a very good grasp on that at all. So that's a new angle for me. As we get into our stories, last year, one of the biggest areas of interest for our Earth 911 audience was information about changing their eating habits. And I think this is both a sustainable issue and also a health issue. So people in surveys were interested in adding more vegetable-based meals, and they wanted to know more about green eating options. So in celebration of Veganuary, we want to talk about food and other green lifestyle choices. So, Trey, I'm going to have you kick us off with talking about Veganuary, what that is, and any other food information you want to share with us.
Sure. So Veganuary, it's kind of a pun. The reason they chose January is it's the closest match to vegan, ends in GAN. But it's basically a month where people will dedicate to not consuming animal products. So no meat, no dairy, no honey, no gelatin. I actually participated 3 years ago. It started in 2014. I was involved in 2016. This is the 6th year, I guess. And they had people sign up on their website. The first year that they had signups, it was only about 3,300 people. This year, it's over 300,000. So they've grown 100-fold in just 6 years. And that's just people who sign up. I didn't sign up when I participated in 2016. So people can actually participate without being part of the website. I will tell you, it's tough for those who want to try it. I would definitely, it's really good experience, I feel like, because you get to challenge yourself. The biggest challenge for me was not giving up meat. It was the fact that so many products we consume on a regular basis have dairy or eggs or gelatin in them that it makes it really, really challenging to even go to the grocery store. Things that you wouldn't think of, like pasta sauce and beer and Jell-O and the very basic chocolates. These things that we just don't even think about when we talk about a meat-based lifestyle, you really have to avoid for those 30 days. It was really hard to eat out. You had to do a lot of discussion with waiters and ask what certain things were made with. And it definitely was difficult and unpleasant at times, especially when you're eating out with a group. But I would consider doing it again for sure. I definitely felt more energy. And I didn't feel like I was limiting myself. The only challenge again was going to a store and looking at every single label super closely and seeing, does it contain cheese? Does it contain milk? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the dairy angle would be really difficult. There's just dairy in so many things and so many foods that I enjoy. So I think that's always been my pause at the vegan diet. I think I can do vegetarian, but I think vegan would be a stretch. Sarah, have you ever tried to do vegan for any period of time?
Yeah, I was actually on a vegan diet for about a year. I had been primarily vegetarian, and then I was having trouble with dairy, so I just decided to go for it. And I encountered many of the issues that Trey was talking about. I found myself making things from scratch more, like certain baked goods. I had trouble finding exactly what I wanted in a vegan version. Or just last weekend, I was making birthday cakes for my son's birthday party, and then I was trying to think if anyone was dairy-free, so I decided to make a dairy-free cake, and I used coconut oil instead of butter. But sometimes it can be, there is a learning curve where it can be hard to figure out exactly what to substitute certain ingredients for or how to make your favorite food still taste good.
Did you feel that there were positives that sort of offset some of the challenges?
Well, I ended up cooking from scratch more. And so I think that's a positive thing because then you really know what's going into your food. A lot of the convenience foods, are obviously more convenient, but they're also more processed. They often have more sodium, more packaging. It often costs more. So I think cooking from scratch, it does take more time. And then it becomes easier over time because you kind of have your favorite recipes and you know what comes out well.
Yeah. I have a couple of good vegan recipes, especially bean-based chilies and things like that I can pull out. But I have never tried to do a full vegan diet for any period of time. But I am intrigued. And I'll tell you, this is a completely about personal ego and vanity. I watched an interview a couple of years ago with Kristen Bell, the actress, and she had gone vegan, and she was explaining that her skin was like a baby's skin. It had never been clearer or more beautiful. And so that is always in the back of my mind, like, well, maybe someday.
I wonder what that is, if it's fewer toxins or her just being more hydrated from eating a plant-based diet.
I don't know. It might just be
plants and vegetables are really hydrating.
Yeah, and have more different nutrients in them. It might just even be her personal system. If you do have trouble digesting dairy or something, then changing to a plant-based diet could be really a remarkable change. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that you raise a good point too, because different people's bodies respond differently to different foods. Or even to the same foods throughout their lifetime.
Very much so.
Like I had trouble with dairy 10 years ago, and now I don't. But that can really shift how people feel depending on their diet.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's a lot of good information. Oh, go ahead, Trey.
I think the other thing people should be prepared for if they decide to go vegan just for the month of January or in general is the cost associated. What Sarah mentioned is really good about making your own things from scratch at home is really helpful. But if you're buying things that are alternatives, like if you're instead of buying cow's milk, buying coconut milk or almond milk or soy milk, it's going to be twice as much as cow milk. And same thing with if you're buying the plant-based meat products, they're going to be as expensive or more expensive than the meat-based products. So it's definitely something you're going to have to make that commitment as well.
And another tip I have as far as eating out, there are certain restaurants that just cater far more to vegan eating than others. And vegetarian restaurants don't necessarily cater that well to vegan eating. It depends on the specific restaurant too. But a lot of Asian restaurants tend to have less dairy, and they can take out the eggs and substitute tofu. So I think there's different types of cuisine that yield to vegan eating better than others.
Yeah, I think so too. And one of the things that is getting easier every year too is that there are now more restaurants that have a significant either vegetarian, vegan aspect, or even some restaurants. I know we have a small restaurant in Tacoma that is entirely vegan. And, so that makes it a lot easier for people. There's actually really good information on the website. So if you're interested in this, check out Veganuary.com. One of the things that made me realize that they had really sort of crossed a barrier was I saw something on Twitter saying that Las Vegas was going to, have all of restaurants offering vegan options for Veganuary. And I thought, if Las Vegas is doing it, we're definitely not in the fringe anymore.
Very true. They got some big name chefs there.
Big name chefs.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too. I wonder how it'll go. We'll have to see. So Trey, I also had you as looking at one of the stories that is just up on our website regarding a recycling mystery of oyster shells. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So as a point of context for our listeners, last year I actually wrote a story on landfill bans for every state in the United States, what you're not allowed to throw in the garbage. And by far the most interesting thing I came across was in North Carolina, you are not allowed to throw oyster shells in the garbage. That was easily the one that was like, wait, really? That sounds, most others are like car batteries or antifreeze, things that are just a no-brainer. Like, I wouldn't think about throwing those in the garbage, but oyster shells, that's weird.
Yeah, that's really weird.
So there's a really great story on the website right now about the reasons for recycling oyster shells. And the biggest reason is that they are a huge benefit to the water ecosystem. Mm-hmm. For those who aren't aware, oysters, as they grow, they need to mature by attaching themselves to other oyster shells. So they grow into new shells, and that's how they mature and grow their process. And oysters are really good for removing impurities from the water. So what we are seeing right now is as restaurants and states haven't been kind of catering to the recycling of oyster shells in the past, these ecosystems have had limited access to them, and it's seen a impact on their habitats. And so what a lot of these especially coastal communities are doing is setting up drop-off points where consumers can bring in oyster shells, more likely restaurants than consumers. Mm-hmm. But if you buy them at the store and you want to recycle them, you have an option for that. But North Carolina is the only state that I'm aware of that you can't put them in landfills. They've had them banned since 2010. But a lot of states, especially those in the water, are really trying to allow drop-off opportunities so you can keep these ecosystems going.
That's great.
And an interesting thing is, especially since we're in January now, it's very similar to Christmas trees. A lot of people, they don't know what happens to your Christmas tree when it gets recycled. In many cases, especially near the water, they actually throw that tree in the water hole, and it creates basically a reef so that water life can benefit from all those nutrients in the tree.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, when we use oysters at home, we eat oysters raw. I always feel really terrible about throwing the shells out. In fact, for a long time, I kept wanting to use them in the garden, but I didn't get a whole lot of excitement from my husband on that idea. So recycling them sounds like a really good idea. I like that. Well, another story we have up on the website that's sort of related to eating is a story about eating in 5 ways to start your indoor gardening this winter. And this is one of the things where if you have a vegetable garden in your yard, you're probably already starting your seeds. But if you don't have it, I'll give you a couple options. First, check out this story, 5 ways to start your indoor gardening this winter. It's on our website. But right now you can start with seeds with even in like an eggshell container or an egg container, a little bit of soil, start your sprouts, and you just, as they get bigger, you move them into slightly larger containers. You can use used cans, used cat food cans, whatever you want, but get them ready so that when spring comes, and depending on what part of the country you're in, that can be at different times, but usually in my state, in Washington, in Western Washington, you're looking at putting things out probably in March for hardier things and probably April for more delicate things. And tomatoes generally don't go out until sometimes even May. It can make it for a really short season for tomatoes. But this is a wonderful way of both getting more very healthy food into your diet, spending time in your garden, which is very good for you, but also if you have children, showing them the fun of growing their own plants and gardens and enjoying making their own vegetable gardens, because I think that's really part of the challenge here is not just to try to find ways to live sustainably, but also to pass that knowledge on to the next generation so that we'll have more people who know how to garden and make their own food. Sarah, I know you do some gardening, don't you? What kinds of things are you getting started right now?
Well, I took a slightly different approach. I had some plants, like a pepper plant that had a bunch of peppers on it that I brought indoors, and then a mint plant that I brought indoors. So I have been still harvesting off of some of my plants from this summer.
Oh, that's good. So did you have them planted in pots then?
Yeah, and I have very large south-facing windows, so I have quite a bit of sunlight, and that helps a lot too, to put them in sunny south-facing windows. Yeah, from pots. I just had them out in pots this summer and then brought them in, which made it an easier transition. Another thing that I like to do, which is slightly different than what you were talking about, is growing microgreens.
Oh, yeah.
Like I used to grow a lot of sunflower sprouts where I would plant them in a really shallow tray of soil and then harvest them when they were maybe 1, maybe 2 inches. And that's a great way in the winter to have really fresh produce, because I find that by January or February, I'm really wanting something fresh. And so many of the greens are imported from so far away that they aren't very fresh.
Well, and with the microgreens and the sprouts, you can really harvest them pretty quickly, can't you? I mean, how long does it take to go from seed to an edible sprout stage?
I believe I let them go about a week.
Okay.
I think it can sometimes be a little bit sooner. Another thing that I did, I used to eat a fair amount of raw foods, and I used to soak mung bean seeds. I believe I soaked them for about a day, a full 24 hours. And then I would put them in a strainer until they got a little tail on them. And that would only take maybe 2 days.
Okay.
Same thing with sunflower seeds.
Okay. And then you could just eat the seed and the little sprouting bit.
Yeah, exactly. You can eat them plain. You can kind of flavor them up, or you can make them into a pate in a food processor.
That sounds pretty good. Very interesting.
Yeah. And they're great nutritionally. They're just loaded with vitamins, and I guess it also makes the proteins easier to digest when the seeds are sprouted.
Oh, that's interesting. Trey, how about you? Do you, I don't remember hearing that you have a garden, but do you do anything this time of year to sort of get ready for any gardening activity?
I don't. Gardening is definitely not my forte.
That's okay. You're going to be busy reading those 1 book a week or 1 book a month books anyway. Well,
so true.
Why don't you tell us about, I had a story up here that I wanted Mitch to cover, but since he's not here, I wonder if you could. It's fighting greenhouse gas emissions while feeding hungry families. What's that all about?
Yeah, so for our listeners who tuned in a few months ago, we had a great podcast about food waste. And so you know how big of a challenge this is in the United States. Basically 40% of our food goes into landfills. It isn't consumed. And a lot of that actually is not because of just leftovers that people throw away. It's because it just doesn't ever get sold to consumers in the first place. So there's a new app that's come out. It's a free app called Food Rescue US. And their website is just foodrescue.us. And you can download it for Android, for iPhones. But what's cool about it is they have 3 different customers they cater to. The first is going to be those that will be the donators. So think about restaurants or grocery stores or anyone who generates a large amount of food that they aren't necessarily going to sell. They can join the app and then list all the surplus that they have that it's available to donate. The second group is going to be probably the most relevant to the people who are listening to this podcast, is just anyone who's has a car and is willing to volunteer, because they're the people who actually go to these providers, pick up the items that are being donated, and then deliver them for donation. So it's really anyone with a car can sign up, and they'll give you a schedule, and you'll know what's in your area that you can actually pick up food and bring it for donation. And then the third is they partner with anyone receiving food, such as soup kitchens, homeless shelters, anything like that, community kitchens, where they are in need of ingredients. They can post what they need, and then the app will partner them up locally with those providers and the volunteers to make sure everyone wins. And I'm not sure when they started, but they've already saved 32 million pounds of food, which is amazing.
That is
amazing. It's great, too, how they give opportunities for people to make a difference by transporting food, too. So there's multiple ways to be part of a solution.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that sounds fantastic. I think it's great that we're talking about it, because I think that's something that people would really like to know about. Well, let's jump from green eating to green travel. Sarah, you have a really great story up on the website, Exploring Ecotourism, 6 Tips to be a Green Globetrotter. And I know I'm starting to do some trip planning for the year. So what things should I be keeping in mind if I want to try to be as sustainable and thoughtful as possible?
Well, one of the best things is to consider taking a staycation. It's a little bit less exotic, but it definitely saves on a lot of fossil fuels, and it's a great way to get to know your community better. You know, many of us haven't been to the museums in our area, but have been to museums in other cities. So it's a great way to take advantage of what your community has to offer. Another thing that I recommend people keeping in mind when they travel is to support locally owned businesses, because it's a lot easier to stay at to stay at hotel chains that we're already familiar with and eat in restaurant chains because we know that there's food on the menu that we like. But supporting locally owned businesses really helps the local economy. So that's a great thing to keep in mind. Now there's also a lot of green travel companies too, and some of them are greener than others, and sometimes it can be difficult to tell from their websites, but there are a lot of green travel companies, and they arrange tours and things like that. And so this can be a great way to see more green things. And many times the guides are trained, to teach you about the ecosystems or the indigenous cultures or things like that.
That sounds really good.
And then another thing too is just checking out protected habitat, going to supporting those projects, because a lot of countries have designated habitat as protected, and so it really helps the local economy then if people take advantage of those opportunities and then maybe eat in restaurants or hire a local tour guide or things like that. It's a great way to help create greener jobs.
I think those are really good suggestions, and actually I think that would make for a more interesting vacation too.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to Ecuador 4 years ago with my children, and we stayed at a lot of locally owned guest houses. We stayed with hosts through Airbnb. Like we stayed with an indigenous family up in the mountains that grew a lot of their own food. Piglets were born while we were staying there. So it was definitely a lot more interesting than kind of a vanilla hotel experience.
Well, and with piglets being born, that's probably like a memory your kids are going to that's a lifetime memory for them.
Absolutely. They helped milk cows, take the cows to pasture. We went to a market where they had a lot of foods that don't grow in other places, like varieties of potatoes that I'd never seen before. And it's also kind of tying in with our food topic. Trying out local foods is a great thing to do while traveling. It's really interesting, like you pointed out, and it also helps to support those traditions continuing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, Trey, do you have any vacations planned this year? Do you have any green globetrotting planned?
I'll definitely be traveling. I don't know if anything will be to Sarah's point about going to Ecuador or somewhere where it's super green. I do most of my traveling in the U.S. But one thing that I saw a lot this year, I'm not sure if you ladies experienced it, was the rise of the dockless scooter. Those were huge. In every city I went to this year, it was a major way of getting around town.
Yes.
And it's another way to be green.
Yes.
Yeah, taking public transportation on vacation can be a really interesting experience as well. Like riding subways and things like that. It can be a great way just to get a different sense of the city and different neighborhoods and such, and kind of mixing more with locals.
Yeah, in Tacoma, we just started a couple of months ago, 2 types of scooters, dockless scooters and bicycles also. And so far, I think it's working out pretty well. I think it's great for just hanging around because you pick up one on the corner and you go wherever you want. I'm not sure it's as good if you want to make a plan to, I need to get across town. Can I find a scooter? Because, they're sort of scattered everywhere. But it's a lot of fun.
But please pack a helmet because they do not provide helmets, and it can be very dangerous if you're riding in city streets with no helmet on.
That's true. And I have to admit, I don't see very many people wearing helmets. That's true.
One more tip that I wanted to throw out, too, is if you are leaving your home for any period of time, there are things that you can do to reduce your home energy use, like unplugging the hot water heater or turning off that fuse for the hot water heater. You can unplug things like alarm clocks, electric toothbrushes, the television, things like that. Turn down the thermostat, and that can really help reduce the energy consumption in your home when you're not there.
That's a really good reminder. I wouldn't think about doing that. So that's a really good point. Well, we do have one Earthling question that was sent to us. Mary in Ormond Beach, Florida asks, and she does appear to be having some problems with this. She says, how do I recycle VHS tapes? This has been so difficult to find out where old VHS tapes can be recycled. Trey, have you gotten any help from Mary?
Yeah. So first off, the more you can reuse these things, the better off everyone is going to be. I would list them on things like eBay. You'd be amazed how this stuff goes in and out of fashion, and people might be looking to buy, especially if it's real movies, not just like home videos. I don't know if Goodwill will accept them anymore because it might be more difficult to sell, but you will find people who will buy your VHS tapes on eBay or other online or Craigslist, those type of options. As far as recycling, mail-in is going to be your go-to resource. There's a company called Green Disc that's based in Missouri, I believe. They will send you a kit that you can put pretty much any media in, whether it's CDs, videotapes, cartridges, even cell phones, and they will recycle all of it for you. You do have to pay for the kit, but that includes the shipping and the processing of the material. The big challenge we're having right now is that the tapes themselves, the case, which is the primary component of it, is polypropylene. And for those who follow at all, the China ban from last year, most of our polypropylene was going to China. So a lot of these programs for videotapes, they got hit pretty hard because China won't accept it anymore. So we have to figure out how we dispose of this or how we recycle this product in the U.S., which is still up in the air.
Yeah. Okay. So sell it if you can sell it, find a way to reuse it, or, choose the mail-in recycling option. I think those are some really good options, and that should help her quite a bit. Well, I think that's it for this episode. Trey, did you have anything else before we close out?
So I have a story that just got published recently on the site. I definitely recommend people to check out. I tried to predict the green trend of 2019 because to me, a lot of the appeal of going green is about being cool. So I want to try to identify for people, hey, here's what's going to be upcoming that you should be aware of, that you can kind of get in on the ground floor.
Okay, so give us a little spoiler. What's like the coolest thing we could do?
Well, I don't want to give it away. I mean, I will tell you right now that I had several different candidates for the coolest, and they're different types. So one's transportation based, one is waste based. So it's definitely some options for people to consider heading into 2019.
Okay, well, I am going to definitely go to the website and check that out because I want to know what those options are. Sarah, anything from you before we close out?
No, nothing comes to mind.
Okay. Alrighty then. So that's it for this episode. If you have made some resolutions for 2019, let us know how it's going. I got to tell you, one of my little resolutions was to give up sugar for a month. It is January 3rd and I am suffering.
Wow.
I know. I'm not sure I'm going to make it.
Of you. That's a hard one.
I may not make it. I'm going to the movies today with my husband, and the idea of not being able to eat something sweet it may be too much. So we'll see.
Are you eating honey or maple syrup or?
Not yet, but I'm sure I will be eating everything. Everything's possibly sweet. Well, if you have any information on resolutions or anything else or questions for us, send us an email. You can email us at feedback@earth911.com. And you can always find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and of course at the earth911.com website. We will see you next time.